difference here, is here to a guided meditation. That is a completely different work. In a guided meditation that you do with a group or with a single person, you guide them all the way because you want them to visualize a certain situation. Yeah? That's where you guide them with your words all the way. That's the only, let me think about, that's the only situation I can think of where you guide them all the way. You know, without the necessarily space and silence period where they need to decide, because you don't want them to decide, you just want them to follow. But that's it. It's only in guided meditation, right? So the other part of the work is a lot about wait and silent and observing. Okay? Very good. Very good question. Thank you, Kimberly. Anything else?
Just one other quick question. The color theory that we learned yesterday, is that Bert Hellinger in Constellations?
No,
the color?
Very good question. That's Malcolm Southwood. I have
Okay.
this from Malcolm Southwood. And I made the color chart because I did not get any documents, neither from Bert Hellinger nor from Malcolm. They just don't do documentation in their trainings. So I documented that in my notebook and I made this color chart. So it's my copyright, but it is based on the teaching of Malcolm Southwood.
Okay, thank you.
And you can also see in some of his books, he's referring to the colors. He's not making a chart. It's not so easy to follow, but he's referring to colors in his books here and there and so on. All right, very good. Any other question? How do you go, Judy?
How am I?
Yes.
Oh, I'm good. How are you? I'm
Great,
good.
very good. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I find it all very interesting. It's somewhat new. Some of it sounds a little Buddhist-like. You know, there's some
No, what is that?
Like Buddhist, like Buddhism. There's feels like there's a little bit of that in here, and yeah.
Well, I don't know enough about
things.
Buddhism to say that it's in here or not.
Yeah, it's in everything. It is everything.
Well, if it's the truth, it will be everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Oh, that's probably something I would like to point out at this stage, that I have no religion. I personally don't believe in religion as a way to evolve on your soul journey, but I respect every religion and people who are drawn to it, that is their way. So as I said before, in this course, you can be of any religion. We have two lovely ladies that are Islam in the other course, in the parallel course, and this teaching goes very well because you don't need to believe in it. You don't need to change your belief system. It is just a structure and a concept that you apply in the work. And if it resonates with you, you also apply it in your own life. Yeah. And if it doesn't resonate with you because it is somehow contradicting any kind of your religious belief system, then don't. You don't need to believe in it. You just use it. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. And that goes actually for especially what we do today and tomorrow. Yeah? So are you ready for that?
Yes.
All about birth? Okay, very cool. So let me bring up my slides. Oh, hang on. Right. So gosh, we have a hot day today. That is very surprising because we're in the middle of winter. or beginning of winter, I have to say. So I probably have to strip. Okay. So why does it take so long? Weird. Here we go. Okay, so welcome to Module 4, Part 2. We are talking today about trauma, birth energies, and the movement towards the mother. So we are talking about releasing trauma. And when I say trauma, of course, we're talking about emotional trauma, not the physical trauma like a broken arm or leg. This is all on the emotional level. We are talking about what birth energies is. If you haven't heard this term at all, it might be new to you. It was new to me when I heard about it, but it is very interesting and very important to understand the concept of birth and birth energies, because we see a lot in family constellation of this kind of traumas, early childhood traumas. Yeah, I will talk you through a concept how birth takes place, the formation of a human body, if you will, on a spiritual level. We talk about rebirthing, and we talk about the interrupted movement towards the mother in a family constellation. And that's more than enough for today. So, trauma release. Childhood traumas are the ones we are looking at. Why is that? Because once a child is turning, let's say 7 years latest, yeah, they're coming out of theta and alpha state into the state that you are until adulthood in, which is a rationalizing. Yeah, you're not soaking up information unfiltered anymore like in theta state. You are not in this half dream state, alpha state, where you are highly susceptible to suggestions. Yeah, this is all done by the age of 7 latest. Right. So everything that happens before year 7 has an impact on everybody's life that stays with them unaddressed because it's subconsciously hidden until it has, it comes up in a healing session. So when you look for the emotional traumas in the work with yourself and with others, don't go further than 7 years. Yeah. You either go into childhood trauma, and that goes all the way, and we see that to the beginning of the conception of the child in the womb of the mother, or you're going into past lives. We do that tomorrow, or you are going in your family system. Yeah, that's where we are looking at in our work. I have never yet seen this line of work working for any kind of trauma. Well, no, okay, I rephrase it. I just thought of something. No, I rephrase it. I make an example. If a client has killed somebody, yeah, and suffers highly under it, and that's theoretically, I have never had that before, yeah, not that I'm aware of. And they would come to a family constellation. And in this family constellation, this trauma of his action as an adult, yeah, comes up. We are not working with that and the victim, or we can, but we also look for future former occurrences in his family system, because there would be a repetition. It would be highly unlikely, I cannot even see how this happened, that there was no entanglement in this person and he would just be the first time murder in the family system and wants to heal it. You know what I mean? This is kind of, I can't even think of a concept when that takes place. But if the wish is there to heal it on a deep soul level, that's why they come to a family constellation, then I would almost guarantee it is an entanglement. It is an involuntarily repeating of a family pattern that has been unaddressed and unknown often. Yeah. So that's why I say childhood trauma is what we're looking at. Yeah. An adult trauma can only hint at a systemic trauma in the family system, which is where we go then to clear it, right? Okay, good. That's then the next thing is family trauma. So that's obviously something that we are very used and accustomed to, that we are looking at a trauma within the family system. So that's another way of trauma release, not with the client as a child, but with a family member via a representative. It's still a trauma. It's an emotional trauma. Otherwise, it wouldn't come up. Only emotional traumas coming up that are attached to this low vibrating feelings, emotions that we talked to yesterday are below 150. Mainly guilt and shame, vibrating at 20 and 40. Yeah. Disguised as anger, fear, and grief often. The trauma is manifested in the subconscious mind as a child, or in the morphogenetic field of the family system as a family trauma, right? Trauma and guilt always goes together. There can be emotional trauma, but it will not have an impact on the family system if there is not this emotion of guilt or shame attached to. This is for our work, we always look for where is the guilt or the shame. When we go through when we work with our representative. We also do this when we work on childhood trauma. Because it would not stick to the child if there would not be this feeling of guilt or shame. I make an example. A very common childhood trauma is as early as in the womb of the mother. When the mother was in a situation when she was pregnant where she didn't know if she wanted or be able to keep the child. If the mother is contemplating and talking to others about aborting the child, that is a deep traumatic experience for the baby in the womb. It is picking up on that, and you see that in the family constellation, and it feels guilty, that it causes the mother stress. Later on, same thing when the mother has a really hard time giving birth to the child, maybe is after that always ill or something, or even dies, same thing. That's a childhood trauma. The child feels guilty. It is completely irrational. Guilt is never true, right? Guilt and shame are actually feelings that do not have any ground in reality. But maybe that's why they are so strong, because you cannot fight them. You don't know where to catch them because they really only exist as an emotion, yeah, that has no foundation. Right? Nobody needs to be ashamed or guilty of anything because life just happens. That's just what it is, especially children, of course. Yeah. So be aware of that. We cannot go with our logic. Guilt and shame feelings, especially in children, are not following any logic. But there is a pattern, and this is a pattern, and when you know the pattern and you work this pattern frequently, then you will catch on it, of course. So don't give up. When you find the trauma in the child or in the family system, in a representative, find out what emotion is attached to it, right? And they will start with anger, mostly sadness, often sadness, and then anger and grief and all these emotions, pride, sometimes arrogance. All of this is possible, but underneath there will be guilt or shame. And when this is admitted, then they know that's the truth. That's an innate knowingness. That's true. And then you give them space that it sinks in, that they really fully understand that that is actually the feeling. And that's the first step to heal a trauma, is this acknowledgement. All right, let's go into childhood trauma. An emotional trauma occurs when one's ability to walk away from a situation is taken away through physical or psychological force. The freedom to make choices and the emotion of guilt or shame is present. Go back to my first example with the baby in the womb of the mother. Can the baby go anywhere? If the mother decides to abort it, does the baby have any power to stop it? No. Of course not. It's completely at the odds or in the hands of the mother's decision. Yeah. So that's the first part why it creates a trauma. And the second is that the emotion of guilt or shame is present. Because through the deep love of the child to the mother and the dependency to the mother, if the child thinks it causes the mother problems, then it will create this emotion of either guilt or shame. So emotional trauma happens in childhood when the child feels helpless, like the baby in the womb or any small child really, yeah. When they're in alpha state and exposed to suggestion, yeah. For example, when there is a 2 or a 3-year-old, and something happens like they accidentally, what can I think of? There's an accident and the child was accidentally part of, let's say there is a parent that is in a situation where it's exposed to a fatal accident, and the child was somehow present and did somehow something that would have probably accelerated that, yeah, whatever that can be. Then somebody else says, "Oh my God, it was your fault," yeah, or don't go there, or don't walk there, and then the child did, and somebody died. That is a suggestion of guilt, yeah. So we need to be very careful when we are around children, especially if we have a strong emotional bond with them, between from the conception on really until they are 7 years old with our words, right? I know that is hard for mother. Who is a mother here? Great. So you know how hard that is, of course, and nobody's perfect. So don't take that, just take that with a grain of salt. Yeah. But it is really important that we are not suggesting any kind of shame or guilt to our children in the state that they are in there. And then the childhood trauma is formed. That's the last step, that it is hidden in the subconscious mind. So they would not be able to remember the event. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a trauma. Trauma is always something, an emotional trauma is always hidden. The subconscious mind is hiding that in the depths of wherever it is residing, and will not release this information because it doesn't want to be remembered, because it cannot live. Remember, you cannot live with guilt and shame. The vibration of 20 and 40 are not livable. Nobody can live in that. So they have to hide it and create another emotion that is overlaying this kind of emotion. Right? And this is also why it's hard to find guilt and shame, because it's hidden. And then the subconscious mind also has, I don't want to go too deep there because that's a whole different course, but the subconscious mind is so good at turning facts around and disguising them and creating something that is either the opposite of what has happened, or it takes it into another situation or another time or something that you cannot access the real situation. And so you cannot acknowledge it. And without that, you cannot heal it. And that's the subconscious mind is thinking it does a fantastic job because it doesn't want you to go there because it hurt so much. Because this creation of guilt and shame emotion is the deepest hurt, if you will, to oneself. A family trauma comes from an entangled person. Now that's probably terms, Judy, you have never heard before. Maybe you have. That's kind of family constellation related. Comes from an entangled person through one of the three dynamics in family constellations who has experienced an act of violence or emotional trauma. Yeah. It is unacknowledged disorder in the family system that is not balanced, often leads to a family secret. And it also has this feeling of guilt or shame attached to it. That will always be there. This is always creating then the fear of dying, either de facto or perceived. Otherwise, the traumas in the family system wouldn't count. Traumas that are lesser than the fear of death are not stored in the morphogenetic field as a traumatic experience that a descendant needs to be entangled with. So it comes to light eventually. It is not strong enough. The impact is not strong enough. Remember of the disadvantage and advantage giver, of course, that's also trauma. That is a perceived dying. Because through taking away the livelihood of somebody, all their belongings, or their wealth, their land, or whatever it is, this family thinks they're gonna die. They cannot get food, they cannot survive. That's a perceived dying, or the fear of dying is perceived, even if it's not true. It leaves a deep wound in the soul of the individuals and that what we call the family soul, which is then taking descendants into service to live on this trauma in any way, shape, or form that is then adopted by this individual, so it is not forgotten. Up to 7 generations. This trauma is passed on to the next generation through epigenetic inheritance. It is a fact, and we know that since Bert Hellinger's working with family constellations since the 1980s, that this is inherited, but it's not genetic, it's an epigenetic disorder, dysfunction, that is indeed caused by a trauma that is now, since a few years, scientifically proven. This trauma caused an epigenetic damage, and this epigenetic damage is actually passed on through the generation. It needs to be healed in order to go ahead in life, of course, and that goes for the individual who comes to a family constellation as well as for the family soul. Because the soul also, as a family, wants to evolve, wants to shed her emotional body, where all the traumatic experiences is, to let go and don't need to incarnate anymore as a family, right? So what goes for the individual soul journey goes for the family soul as well. That is also a journey. And you might know of families that have no descendants anymore. They literally just die out. Yeah, that's a family soul clearing all the karma, if you will. A common family trauma is the interrupted movement towards the mother. It is a childhood trauma, and it is passed on from generation to generation. That's one of the, we don't call that entanglement, we call that a repetitive pattern, because that is something that is often passed on through absolutely each and every generation. That's what you see in 99% of the family constellations, where you have an interrupted movement towards the mother, that also their mother has one, and also the grandmother has one, and then to the great-grandmother has one, and then the great-great-grandmother has none. And that's where you start to heal it. And we will talk about that today. It's very rarely skipping a generation. Has happened, I have seen it, but it's not the common picture that you see in a family constellation. The emotion is fear or anger, camouflaging, shame or guilt. Also, when you come to the bottom of a family trauma, that's also what you see. Very similar to a childhood trauma. However, don't mix it up, because the trauma can be in adulthood. So that the trauma will most likely be as a family trauma in the adulthood. Not most likely, but it is as well an option, right? Other than the childhood trauma, the trauma in one's own life that is happening now and here. So the sudden happenings which causes trauma can be released immediately. So that would be a trauma that, and you can do that when, as an adult, children can't do that normally, and that's why it's normally stuck as well. You can always do it when there is no guilt and shame attached. Well, that's one thing. So every trauma that we have still accumulating throughout our day, to this day, can be, and we will, and we do that unconsciously all the time, released immediately through crying, shaking, consciously breathing out, to let it go. Yeah. So any kind of trauma, that emotional trauma that happens in your environment, if there's no guilt or shame, you can let it go, and it's easy to do, right? But if the emotion of guilt or shame is added to the shock or fear, then it becomes a problem, because the emotion of guilt and shame blocks the release of shock and fear, and therefore the trauma is held in the subconscious mind to be released later as a phobia or allergy. That is possible. And that is what you have in former generations. Think of the victim. That's one of the most common dynamics, yeah? That the victim is excluded from the family. The victim is the one that feels ashamed. The perpetrator is the one that feels guilty. The perpetrator is either grieving or is angry. Nobody looks at the victim, and the descendants has a phobia of height or something. Yeah, you never know, something through epigenetic inheritance. And that's why they come to you. That's why they come to family constellation. Not because they deliberately, most of them don't come to look deliberately at the family system, see what is there. They normally come with their own issue, want to clear the own issue, and know the strong impact of a family constellation in helping with that, to release it. And then, to a surprise of everyone, it is related to the fourth generation or something. Remember on the chart, guilt and shame are the lowest vibration. They are not livable. Nobody can live in this state. I don't know whether, maybe think about for a moment when you have experienced in your life this feeling of guilt or shame. Take a moment and just maybe close your eyes and just try to find out, was there a moment in your life, adult life, of course, maybe childhood life, I don't think you would remember, but anywhere where you remember that you really felt guilt or shame of something. Not so superficial, not more going deeply. And if you find something, go in this feeling and really feel how this, the whole body, how this feels. If you still can breathe, if you still can, or if your heartbeat is racing, or if you get a headache, or any whatever, any kind of sensation that comes up. And then just imagine you would have to live for the rest of your life in this state. that you're feeling right now? Would it be even possible? Now let go of this situation. It's not sticking with you. Maybe breathe out, deep exhale, anything to let go of it. So you can come back and be present. Did you find anything? Kimberly, you did? How did it feel? Can you describe it?
Well, when I went back to the event,
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to hold my head down and disappear,
Mm-hmm.
hide away, not be seen.
Very good. So would you be able to live like this for the rest of your life?
No, because it's so opposite. I'm like one of the most gregarious, outgoing people I know. And it's like I really couldn't live like that.
No.
I just couldn't.
Thank you. That's exactly what I want you to feel. And Eva, did you find something?
Yes, of course, and it was something similar. I was looking down and felt that heavy feeling in my body, and it could be impossible to live like that. It
Yeah.
just impossible.
Very good. Very good. And you, Judy?
I did feel similar to them, but I also felt very hot under my skin, very
Mm-hmm.
warm and hot, and it was not a pleasant feeling.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Very good. Thank you for sharing. So that's what I wanted you to feel firsthand, that it is impossible to live under this emotion. It is there, but you can't let it, until you haven't addressed it and healed it, it is not livable. So this is why we are adopting other emotions to disguise it. Yeah. And that's an emotion you can live with. Everything over 50 you can actually live with, even if it's not a good life. Very good. And that goes, and that's now that you feel how it feels, then you know why in a family constellation it takes a while for a representative to actually get to that feeling often. It is rarely that you ask at the beginning of family constellation what you feel and they say guilt or shame. They do. It's not totally uncommon, but it's rarer than they say, I feel sadness, I feel grief, or I feel anger, right? That's more what you hear. But always when you hear that, remember in the back of your mind, aha, there must be somewhere guilt or shame, either in this representative or somebody they are entangled with. Okay. Yeah, desire can also be an emotion that is disguising shame or guilt. Every emotion that is below, let's say 175 on the chart of David Hawkins. So how does guilt in family constellations show itself, or how do you see it? Yeah. The feeling of guilt is when there is a wrongdoing, and the wrongdoing is the disobeying of the orders of love, of Bert Hellinger's orders of love, right? And of course in life, but we are now looking at the family constellation. So remember what we talked about in module 1, the orders of love. If there is either a disorder in the first, second, or third order of love, then that is causing the trauma that is mixed with the feeling of guilt. Because there is an innate knowing of the orders of love in every individual, and this bond to the family system, right? So they want to be obedient. But, you know, that's life. It doesn't happen. Things happen. Shit happens, if you will. And then there is this unbalance. This is observed as unable to look at or go to the other which has been wronged. Yeah. This is how you see it in a family constellation. This is the feeling of guilt or shame. So you have this looking away situation often where you see, aha, something to inquire. Maybe the guilt is here in this representative, hidden. Therefore, other family members, the descendants, they are taking over the role. They feel the guilt. They look at the victim. They express the guilt as in anger or grief. They express it, right? So because somebody's expressing it doesn't mean that that is the source of the trauma in the family system. You know that. That could be an entanglement. The entangled person has the same symptom as it would be an own childhood trauma. So we, as always in a family constellation, we have to go back and see where it started. Because also the way we are, and we will talk about that, I think today, the way we are choosing the family that we are born into has a lot to do with being drawn to the same energy that we are, right? That's this magnetic energy there. So there must be something in our own life that is already similar to happenings in the lives of the ancestor. Unless you take a big quantum leap and you reincarnate in a completely new family, which we will talk about today. Let's talk a little bit about the subconscious mind. As I said, that's a whole talk that we have no time for, but I would like you to give the absolute basics in case you haven't heard about that yet, so you get a better understanding why all of that, what that we're talking about, is not coming to anybody's mind, like to the client's mind at all. Because the subconscious mind has basically three functions. The first function of the subconscious mind is growth, maintenance, and repair of the body. So things you don't need to think about. That's all the doing of the subconscious mind. It's regulating all of this. The second function is to get used to a certain kind of behavior, which we call repetitive behavior, or which we also call body memory. So we don't need to think about this anymore. That is just, giving more space to the conscious mind to think of other things. A typical repetitive behavior is driving to work in your car. Like if you always take the same route in your car to work or somewhere else, then you will, after a while, not even remember how you got there. Because you're completely on auto mode. And this auto mode is steered by the subconscious mind. It becomes a repetitive behavior. Same as if you learn a craft or if you learn a sport. You train and train and train and train whatever you are learning, and it becomes so natural that your mind can wander off and you still do the right thing. And that's typical for the learning of the subconscious mind of repetitive behavior. To give space, freedom, and more room to the conscious mind to be alert and think about new things where it is needed, right? And the third function of the subconscious mind, and that is what we are concerned with in our work, is to avoid pain. The subconscious mind's function is to avoid pain, physical and emotional. The subconscious mind is keeping you away in 99.9% of the cases from any kind of dangerous behavior, like touching a hot plate or jumping off a cliff or whatever, right? So you don't need to think about that. The subconscious mind will not want you to do that. You're standing at the edge of the cliff and you can be in la la land, but you will still not fall down. The subconscious mind will hold you back unless you want to kill yourself. That's another thing. But as long as you don't want to kill yourself, the subconscious mind will keep you safe in practically every situation. You don't need to think about that. However, yeah, Judy.
So I'm sure that you'll cover this, but I mean, people get diseases and they do have pain in their body. So there's something that's happening that's overriding the subconscious, right, in order to cause that pain.
Yes, of course. The subconscious mind cannot delete the pain, but it can do everything to avoid it where it is avoidable, right?
Okay.
Of course, when you break your leg, you are in pain. But you know what happens then? The subconscious mind takes over and lets you limp. So all the work is done with the other leg to avoid pain. Let's say you break your right leg, yeah? Then the subconscious mind takes over and makes you use your left leg much more than the right to avoid pain on the right leg. That is causing a hip dysfunction or a hip displacement. That is causing back pain. So once the leg is healed, the right leg is healed, now you have back pain, right? That's what the conscious mind does, because it wanted to avoid the pain on the right leg because it was so painful to break it, painful to use it, right? And if you go to a osteopath, for example, they find all these traumas. Yeah? They can go through the body and they find it. Yeah? And when they say, oh, 2 years later, you have back pain, you have no idea why you have this permanent back pain, right? And then you go to a good osteopath and they would go through your body and work it out and say, and ask you, did you ever break your right leg? And then you would remember. And then they say, yeah, and that's why now your back is in permanent stress, to avoid that you put pressure on your right leg. So the subconscious mind is not it's very good at the job of number 1 and 2, not so good at the job of number 3. Yeah. And especially when it comes to emotional trauma, because the subconscious mind wants to avoid at all costs that once there was an emotional trauma, let's take a childhood trauma. Let's say there was a situation that, I don't know, you were playing on the street with 4 years old, with whatever, with your little wheelie, whatever you do, right? And you get in front of, and the car is coming, and the car is almost hitting you, and your dad runs in and grabs you and throws you away and gets run over. That's, that's an emotional pain for the baby, for the child. The father might be died, or it might be disabled, or is in pain, is in the hospital for weeks, whatever. Yeah. So this emotional trauma, the subconscious mind is closing that in. Yeah. It is no remembrance of the event, but this child will be shaking when it sees a bike. It will never go on a bike again, or it shakes before crossing a road or something like that. That's what the subconscious mind does. It doesn't want you to go on the road anymore. It doesn't want you to ride a bike anymore. Every situation that was part of causing this trauma, this emotional trauma, should be avoided at all costs, right? Even if it's silly, because now you're an adult, you can look, you will not go under a car anymore. But the subconscious mind doesn't know that. This is completely shutting this down. And you have no idea, because this whole situation is completely hidden in the subconscious mind, because it doesn't want you to think about it, because then it creates the same emotional pain again, this agony, this guilt, this shame. So you don't know why it is, and you have no idea, and you have no reconciliation of this event, and you have no idea why you can't leave the house anymore. Is that a question, Kimberly, or are you? Okay. Yes.
Well, I was just wondering about, because you had mentioned suicide, and could that be the subconscious mind avoiding pain, the emotional pain? That's the only answer,
To
the
kill
only
itself
way
then?
to, yeah.
Oh, wow. I have not thought about that yet. It seems a bit drastic.
I just, if somebody's in that state, that's
Maybe.
their solution. That becomes their solution.
Maybe an extreme. Normally, the subconscious mind is not a function to take life, right? To take its own life. It would be. At the moment, I cannot quite see why it would do that, but I won't say no. But I have not seen it yet.
I personally lost someone to suicide, and so and have, know
Yeah.
know a little bit about it. And I know that it's, it was due to emotional pain.
Mm-hmm.
That was
Interesting.
the only way they could see to end that suffering.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just a completely, and so I was just wondering if that's a possibility.
It's of course it's a possibility, especially if this emotional pain. So what I would think immediately when you say that is that this emotional pain and the solution to kill itself, to get out of the emotional pain, is an entanglement in the family system. Something like a strategy of the family system that has been used before.
Mm-hmm.
That comes to mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so the subconscious mind either needs to play along with it or gets completely overridden by the conscious mind that I want to kill myself. The subconscious mind's function is more to preserve life, right? So this is why I'm a little bit wondering how that would work.
It's a tricky one. I hadn't really thought about it as coming from subconscious before until you just seeing it like this, and the thought of the avoiding the emotional pain.
Interesting. Okay. So you have heard me saying that most all the time we only see the trigger, not the trauma, right? Because the trauma is hidden. You cannot see it. Nobody can. The client cannot see it. You cannot see it. Nobody can. But what you see is the trigger. The trigger is triggering the emotional trauma. Let's go back to this example with the child on the bike on the street. Let's say the father died because it saved its life. Right. Now, let's say the subconscious mind is preventing this child as an adult to go on a bike or to do the driver license, and they just don't want to do the driver license. They don't want to drive a car. and although it's odd, and the whole family is like, you need a car, and they said, no, I don't want to drive, and they don't know why. So that would be something that can be the case. Yeah. Now let's imagine that there is a emergency situation. Let's imagine he has his own child, and the child wants to have a bike. And no, they don't get a bike, right? You would not buy them a bike. And then the grandfather comes, and for the fourth birthday of this child, guess what? He bought a bike. And the child is totally happy and wants to ride the bike on the street, and the father is whatever, has a breakdown. Yeah, whatever it is. Or an allergy appears, or whatever. It can be anything, right? And then they have no reconciliation that this has to do with the fourth birthday of the child, getting a bike, reminding the subconscious mind of the situation it wants to avoid, to come to life again, to come back to memory. So now the subconscious mind, in a strange reaction to that, and that's what we call a trigger, is creating this allergy. Let's say psoriasis all over the body, right? And when this client comes to you because of this psoriasis that he probably has now since years and nothing works, no whatever, no cream, nothing works, yeah. And then you go, you apply the work that we do, then this trigger will lead you to find the trauma for your client because you ask, when did it start? And these, as in family constellation, remember this time frame to 6 months. So I always say, what happened 6 months before it started? I always ask that. And there was an example comes to my mind from a client recently from Europe. He had this skin disease, severe skin disease. And then I asked, you know, when did it start? And he said, well, that was 3 years ago, blah, blah, blah. And then I asked, what happened 3.5 years ago? And then he thought about it and said, he got fired from his job. He was with for 40 years. And then we went through something that was, you know, a mother issue in the end. And that was it. That was the reason. And this skin disease was the trigger. No, sorry. The trigger was this being fired. And that was then showing itself as the skin disease. So this is how the subconscious the subconscious mind works, right? And if you once you understand the logic of the subconscious mind, it's really easy to work with it. Because it does have this logic. So remember, your subconscious is concerned with your survival, not your happiness, right? It's in survival mode. It wants you to survive. And if you are unhappy because you got skin disease, you don't drive a car, you know, that doesn't count for the subconscious mind. Okay. So let's look at the trauma and trigger a little bit closer. The panic attack, which we call a phobia, is an attempt from the subconscious mind to release these emotions, but they can't, of course, right? Because it's not the true happening, not acknowledging what is. It takes enormous energies to suppress these emotions of fear or guilt or shame because of their low frequency. And people suffering a trauma will have less energy and are emotionally weak and fall ill often. That's because they have an emotional trauma. So the physical body is reacting to that because they are lacking energy. Every kind of trauma is sucking up. The suppression of this memory of the trauma is sucking up a lot of energy from the subconscious mind. You only experience the trigger and not the trauma because the subconscious mind won't let you remember it. The work is to go back and find where the trauma originated, meaning find the guilt or the shame, and release it there. Don't be fooled by the trigger. That's the only thing, because the subconscious mind is giving you that, you know it is not it. Childhood trauma is released through regressions, and we do that in part 3. And the family trauma is released in, of course, a family constellation. That's how we do it. And that's also why I also teach you regression, because we do have a lot of childhood trauma when we work with clients that come for a family constellation. And in my experience, it has been proven that without going through the childhood traumas first, you can't go deep in the family system. This is kind of like a blockage that is in the way. Yeah. So it's kind of going over the childhood traumas first, and then you go deeper. That's also when you do the work repeatedly with your clients or on yourself, you will see that the further often that the further lying back traumas of the family system are coming up later in time. So we kind of go deeper and deeper often. Right, so yeah, we have time. We go through birth energies and rebirthing first, and then we have our break. So let's talk about birth. Birth is a change from the non-physical reality into the physical reality. That's how we defined, for the sake of our work, birth. Yeah? A change from the non-physical reality into the physical reality. That's birth. Yeah. The heart plays an extreme important role here, and probably in a different way than you have ever thought about it or heard about it. We will also have to work with birth energies. These are energies that are specifically created for the event of the birth, because it requires a lot of energy from the child and from the mother to let go of each other. Because before, in 9 months, all the energies was going into bound to each other, right? And not letting go, obviously. But now everything has to change in an instant, if you will. And that requires a very specific energy that is out of our hands, yeah, that we cannot create consciously, that is created naturally under certain circumstances that we call the beginning of the birth. Yeah. I have a little animation for you about the concept how a human being is created. And then, of course, once we know all about the birth, we will also look into rebirthing and how we work with rebirthing situations. And finally, we are at the end of our day with interrupted movements towards the mother, where we go through in detail. So the birth energy is created from the moment the birth starts. And a natural birth starts after 40 weeks with the water breaking, the first contraction, and then the opening of the cervix. For those mothers here, did you experience that kind of birth with your children? Yes, Kimberly? And Judy, how was your giving birth?
I was actually 3 weeks late with no signs of anything happening. So they induced me, and I ended up having, after 3 days of nothing, I ended up having a C-section.
Okay, very good. We go through that as well. Was this the only birth you gave?
2. I had 2. The second one, we just, because of I was following the same pattern, they just did the C-section.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
Planned, yeah, it was all planned. So I never went into any contractions with the second one.
Very good. So you will learn a lot today when we talk about that, and maybe have some aha moments when we talk about that. Yeah. So remember, this is how a normal natural birth looks like. And of course, nowadays, there's also a lot of, not emergency, a lot of planned C-sections. Like, that's kind of the common thing to do, because of course, for the hospitals, that seems to be the easiest way to schedule birth.
Yeah. So I just want to add to that they let me have complete control over it. It was just at the end when they said your baby is starting to have some signs of stress that I agreed to it, but they did not push me at all.
No, that's what I call an emergency C-section.
Okay.
Yeah. But it doesn't matter actually in the realm of energies. It really doesn't matter if it's an emergency C-section or a planned C-section. It has the same outcome, really, or impact on the lives of mother and child. Yeah. So these birth energies are created in both alike, mother and baby. And even if you're not a mother yet, like Eva, you work with clients who are mothers, and you work with clients who definitely are children or have been children. So this is happening in our work as a lot. So we need to know, we don't need to be mothers to understand it, and we definitely need to know about it to be able to help with these. So the birth energies in a normal birth are, we talk about that, I know, with the charts coming up. Then we have birth energies in a normal birth. A normal birth, 40 days, water breaks, first contractions, opening of the cervix, and then it takes 6.5 hours, and that's or 6 to 8 hours, and that's considered a normal birth, right? Then we have different issues with birth energies in a fast, in an interrupted, or in a forced birth, meaning that is a little bit too early. And then we are dealing differently, or there's the different outcome with birth energies in a slow and a traumatic birth, right? Like what Julie just shared, 3 weeks after, that would be in the light of birth energies, would be a slower traumatic birth, right? And then, of course, we have cesarean sections. That's also something we have to look at. And then we also will look at postpartum depression, which is also a very important part, has to do with the birth energy. Okay, let's look at a normal birth. A normal birth takes 6 to 8 hours. That's just energy-wise, right? That doesn't mean that every other birth that takes longer or shorter. I mean, when we say it's not normal, it's when we are considering what is a normal birth, we are taking this figure as a rule of thumb, 6 to 8 hours. How long was the birth in your cases, Kimberly? You remember?
Yeah, both of my births were traumatic. They started normal and ended traumatic. So
long?
What's that?
How long?
They were each at least 12 hours.
Okay. Yep. Yep. Okay. When in a normal birth, let's assume we have a normal birth that we're looking at here, just to know what is normal for the birth energies to be released. Yeah. This is a huge amount of energy that is released of instinct birth energies in both mother and baby. Yeah, the baby needs to go through the birthing canal to stabilize the spirit in the body. I will show you a little animation why that is. So it's important for the baby to go through the birthing channel. The baby needs to use up all the birth energies by struggling to move out of the womb, and the mother uses her power to push the baby out also in order to use up the birth energy, because they are there. They are created by the beginning of a normal birth. So there's now this basket full of fruits, let's say fruits, yeah, harvest. Basket is full immediately because all the fruits, all the figs are ripe on your tree. You have a full basket, and now you need to eat it up because they rot very, very quickly. And that's the same with the birth energies. Boom, it's created, and now it needs to be eaten up by the enormous energies the baby and the mother need in order to fulfill this goal to let go of each other and to give birth to the baby. Yeah. The baby has to stay uninterrupted. So this is the ideal, the ideal in terms of using up birth energies. The baby has to stay uninterrupted with the mother until the colostrum has been delivered. So that's also something that you often don't get in hospitals. In former days, they intended to take the baby away to weigh it and bath it for some reason and then give it to the mother. That's already, by the way, causing an interrupted movement towards the mother. So that would be important for a normal birth, to leave the baby uninterrupted with the mother at least until the colostrum has been delivered. The baby has a protective shield of light for several weeks. Yeah, and therefore it has to stay with the mother in the so-called 40-day bed. That is a period that most indigenous people following, and I remember that in ancient times in Germany, that was also a saying, that the mother and the baby stays at home together for the first 40 days of the life of the baby. And that has a reason, because the baby has this energy field around, this protective shield of life, if you will, yeah, and should not be handled by other people that are, you know, not like suitable, if you will. So that's the ideal, right? In the modern world, we probably don't do that anymore, but that would be ideal in the light of thinking about the birth energies of the child. The father is in this phase not important. It can be involved if they are probably instructed. He would be great to support the mother, of course, but for the birth energies, they are only between a mother and baby. Yeah. So the father, although some they look like it, they are not part of it. They don't create any birth energies, right? Because they don't need to push out the baby, and they don't need to let go of the bond of the baby, because they haven't even formed the bond yet. So that's sometimes when you've been asked, what about the father? That's not the role of the father in this state. So now we look at how this human being is created. Remember, we have the physical body, we have an astral body, and a spiritual body. The physical body's home is Earth. The astral body, or the soul, home is the astral plane. And the spiritual body, or the higher self, that is, its home is the world of light. So remember what we said yesterday. Now, to create a human being, it is all starting way before the mother gets pregnant. The higher self, that's the spirit, needs to be reunited with the astral body, the soul, yeah, which is left behind at the end of the last life to go home to the light. That's what needs to happen first, right? This reuniting. And then the soul needs to learn the planned lesson in the astral world, and needs a new body therefore, and therefore has to be in line with the karma of mother and father as well. So they have been carefully selected in the astral world. Yeah, it is not random where we are born into at all. And then the body needs to be stable and genetically intact, of course, otherwise it wouldn't survive. And therefore it likes to reincarnate in the same genetic family where they came from. And that is why we do reincarnate a lot in our own family. And also in family constellation, when you work with your ancestors, it is common, and sometimes when you are very aware, you can even see that one of the representatives is actually a former life of the client, for example. Yeah, that can all be part of the family constellation. That is not what you share with everyone. That is something you know, right? That's important. Now, in the week 1 to 12, when a sperm and egg have met, the physical body is starting to form. Now, something very, very magically happens here in about week 5 or 6. That is when the heart is created. That's the first organ that's created out of the 2 arteria and vein. Is it called vein in English? The 2 main blood runways. Yeah, they are forming the heart in the center of the clump of cells. Right. This is what happens. Why? There is no blood to pump through. There are no limbs to be. You know, the whole physical explanation what the heart is doing, it makes no sense when you look at birth. But there is a very important part to the heart, and that's why it's the first thing that is created, because the heart starts to pump at week 5 to 6. This is what you see on the ultrasound. This is where you know you're pregnant, is because you see the heart is pumping. Why? Why? There is no even blood to run through anything. No, it is because this pumping action of the heart is creating an energy field, an electromagnetic field. And this is magnetic and attracts the soul. Because otherwise the soul would not know. The soul, remember, the soul cannot move. It has no body to move around. So the soul is attracted out of the body when the body gives up into the emotional color they have become, because this is attracting them. That's magnetic. Now the opposite happens when the heart is beating that is exactly aligned with the frequency of the soul, that it attracts this soul out of the astral world into the physical world. That's what it needs. And that's what the heart does. And it will do that the whole life until its last beat. And that's the true purpose of the heart. So then by week 13, the soul, the electromagnetic field is strong enough to attract the soul actually into the body. And that's also why we know after week 12 that the pregnancy is stable, because the soul has decided, yes, this body is strong enough, this is genetically intact, this is what I was waiting for, I can go. And that is made through the heart. The heart is telling her that. Then we coming to week 17. Yeah, Judy, let me just say. We come into week 17 to 40 when the spirit, who is in the world of light, is also attracted, but it's not coming in, it's surrounding mother and child. And that's often when you think they have a glow, like pregnant mothers have this certain glow. That is when the spirit is very present, right? And waiting what happens, you know? And it's also protecting the mother and child, and this new life experience it is eager to go into, and to help going through the soul journey again. So comes to week 40, birth takes place. We're talking about a normal birth, yeah, which takes 6 to 8 hours. And that is what needs the spirit to also enter the soul and body complex, if you will. It needs to go through the birth canal, and it needs this birth energies that is attracting the spirit into the body. Next step is, now we have, hooray, the baby born, yeah. And now we might and hopefully have created circumstances in this life that is specific to the soul journey until the last day, the last breath they take, yeah? You have seen the color change in the soul to yellow. Now we hope, or we assume, that this is a life where this soul is evolving on the chart of emotions and became a higher frequency emotion, right? If this is the case, and then the heart gets slower and slower and more unreliable, more weaker. That means the attraction for the soul is lesser and lesser until the last beat. And then there is no electromagnetic field anymore that is holding the soul or the spirit to the body, right? And then the soul is drawn back into the astral world, but this time into a different realm, into a different emotional realm with a different color, in this case, yellow. And of course, the spirit goes back to the world of light and waiting there for the next moment that it can help with this experience of a next lifetime. And also, you have heard of this, or if you know of, or if you read about near-death experiences, or people dying naturally, slowly, that they kind of often report back, or you can observe that they kind of fade out and then have more moments, and then they fade out again. That's what the soul does when the heart gets weaker. They already are drawn back, and then it comes back because the heart gets a moment of strength, and then it goes back. So that is normally not very sudden, like in an accident or a sudden death. That is normally naturally a slow process, which also has been said to be about 9 months, like the birth. That's just reversed, if you will. That's pretty much reversed. So there's a chart you can take a screenshot now, maybe for you, Judy, if you want to, or if you, the ones on the complete training who have the video recordings, you can take a screenshot there. That is just every information together in one chart.
I just had a question.
Yes, Judy. No, you too.
About from the astral body to the physical body, right? When that happens, is that related to like the quickening? Like when a lot of women feel around that same date, they feel like that's the only word I know for it, the quickening. And it's just like this intense feeling like something has happened inside of your body with the baby.
Definitely. Yeah.
Is that it?
There's a
That's
word
it.
for it. I have no
Yeah,
idea. What? Say it again.
it's quickening, like quickening, like quick, something
Like,
that's very quick, and then
fast.
ENING, quickening. Yeah, it's an old
Interesting.
term. My grandmother
Ah,
used to use it all
well,
of the time,
you know, they
and it
know all this
happens.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
happens right at that period of
Yeah.
time. And when you said that, I thought, oh, that's it. I felt it with both my children.
That's it. So that's it. Exactly, that's it. The quickening. That's so good to know that that is actually a word. Yeah, I would say absolutely. Yeah, that would be it. It would be a strong moment in the life of the mother to
Yeah.
to host another soul, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
would
I
say so.
quite frankly have never felt anything else like it. It's just very quick and intense, and it's just
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And then this glow starts, right? And also you normally stop being sick at that time as well, right?
Well, hopefully, yeah, I didn't,
Yeah,
but
you didn't. I was never
no.
sick, so I was never sick.
You're lucky.
Yeah, no. Yes, Kimberly.
I was green most of my pregnancy. I was so sick. I felt like I was on a roller coaster. But my
Okay.
question
So
is,
it's not related then. I take that back. It's not related with the quickening.
the mother and child can develop symptoms of unused birth energies. Are you going to discuss the symptoms of the unused birth
Absolutely.
energies? Okay, cool.
Absolutely. So we talked briefly about the heart and this amazing function of the heart, yeah. So this is beats, this creates, the beat is creating a strong, that you can measure. The electromagnetic field of a heart can be measured. That's not a secret at all, right? Nobody really wonders why. Why would the heart create an electromagnetic field? Like if you study maths at uni, you're not told why. You know the electromagnetic field is created by the heart or is surrounded or whatever. The heart is emanating an electromagnetic field, but nobody tells you why. And nobody's even looking for this as far as I know. But we know why. That holds the three energies in one body together. Yeah, the soul is attracted back to the astral plane, and the spirit of light, spirit to the world of light when the heart isn't creating the strong electromagnetic field anymore. And that is actually a term for it. It's called spiritual law of gravity. Yeah, this inability of the soul to move, but this is why we need Earth to actually jump shift, if you will, runs, right? It's kind of the gateway, if you want to. In meditation, deep sleep, and in some breathing exercises, the heartbeat can be slowed down, right? And therefore, the electromagnetic field becomes also weaker. And the spirit and the soul can go on a trip home, and that's called out-of-body experiences. That's the whole magic about it. Yeah, you can either involuntarily or deliberately slow down your heartbeat, and then as slower the heartbeat goes, as freer the soul gets. I would like you to share with you a fact that you might not aware of, that the hands are literally an extension of the heart. The hands are built out of the heart is the first organ to be built, and there are lots of chests around the heart, and one of them is extending into the hands, right? When the baby is getting shape. the hand shape. So you are literally carrying your hands, your heart in your hands. And that is why the touch is so powerful for healing. Or not even the touch, just the holding hand. And you know that from Reiki and from everything else. And the most powerful is, of course, when the heart is vibrating, causing this vibration of the emotions on a higher emotion, above 400. Right? That's where the healing effects come from this love, unconditional love. The heart chakra is also a fun fact, is a turning point from animal nature to spiritual beingness. Everything in the chakras 1 to 3 are animal nature, sex, recreation, survival, food, everything like this. Rivalry, territory, all these emotions that are related to this. And above this is all about creativity, speaking your truth, seeing through your third eye. That's all spiritual pursuit into higher realms of beingness. And the heart is in the middle of it. So it has to go through the heart. Nobody comes out of animal nature into the spiritual realm without going through the heart. There is a wonderful book, Living from the Heart by Nirmala, which, did you read it, Kimberly? No, because so highly recommend it. It's amazing. It is really teaching how to make decisions away from rational mind or emotional body into the heart space, where decisions should be made. So now let's talk about the not normal births and what that impact that has on the birth energies. So a birth less than 5 hours means, now that you can think about how birth energies work, you can understand that when there is a birth that takes less than 5 hours, that the birth energies have fully formed because birth has started, but they are not used up completely. And the birth energies are so specific to this giving birth time that they cannot be used or transformed into anything else. They are literally leftovers. They are stuck in the body, if you will, in the energy field. Mother and baby are still energetically connected and want to let go of each other to complete the separation. And that is causing then this relationship between mother and child later in life, where there's a lot of fighting going on. Yeah, it is like you cannot live together in peace, but you cannot let go of each other neither. Right, and that is because the birth energies have not been used up. They still struggle both to let go of each other, to push each other away, literally, but they can't do it through the birth canal anymore. So now they do it in real life. And they are still connected as if they would still have an umbilical cord connecting them. So they cannot really let go of each other neither. The baby and the child, so what you can do here, and that's also ancient wisdom, of course, right? Of course, midwives and mothers and grandmothers of ancient times knew all about that without being taught. The baby can be swaddled. That means put into tight sheets, yeah? And so the birth energies, it is mimicking the birth canal, and the baby is kind of using his energy to struggle in this tight sheets they are wrapped into, and can use up the birth energy. The adult can have a rebirthing or regression if they develop, because of this stuck birth energy, a phobia, or they want to better their relationship with their children, if this is still an issue, something like that. So that's what we then provide. That would be our way to help them. And of course, that is the child, so the adult who was the child in the birth, that's what I'm saying. And then the mother can be helped with a guided regression into the birth. into rebirthing the child and releasing all the birth energies there. Now we have the other side of the birth, a slow and a traumatic birth. So you can, so a slow or a traumatic birth are everything beyond 8 hours now. The baby, toddler, child has often a poor concentration and reasoning, likes to spend time alone, often doesn't like water or head underwater, something like that, is impatient and aggressive, feels frustrated, fear, anger, and is fast, pushing others out of the way, bullying, things like that. Not all of this, but one or two of these symptoms can occur in the child that has a slow or traumatic birth. Is there anything, Judy, that you can see there that you would relate?
Not really, no.
Good.
No, my son is just, he's a very kind, sweet person, and he was a kind, sweet child. So no, my daughter.
How about water? Does he like to put his head underwater?
Yeah, he's fine with all of that. He's very, very patient.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't really, my daughter would be more.
Does he spend time alone? Does he like to be alone?
Spend time with alone or with people, it doesn't matter. He's just different. He's a different kind of person. But my daughter would fall more into this. She is definitely impatient. She gets very frustrated. She can anger fast. Yeah, this is my daughter.
Interesting. Very good. Very good. So you have a special son there then?
My son and I had a connection in the womb. Like I would have dreams and we would have conversations. So it's a very different relationship.
Yeah.
Than my daughter. It's completely different.
Yeah. Interesting how this is then actually plays out in terms of birth energies. Interesting. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And Kimberly, what do you think?
Well, I really don't see any of these in either one of my boys. And they both had slow traumatic births.
Okay, so that's fine.
Yeah.
Let's see what is coming more. As an adult, they are often coughing. They have often skin disease like psoriasis. They can feel claustrophobic, and they sometimes also self-inflict wounds. That is all. I
was going to say my older son has acid reflux, and so the coughing like from acid reflux, and he's had that his whole life. Yeah,
and that would be exactly because of that. That would be because of the
adult. It's already
because of the slow birth.
Yeah, and I believe that too, because
no, that's definitely, and we can definitely help with that. So and then we have the case of an early birth. Now that is different to a fast birth or a slow birth because it's a birth that happens before the birth energies are created. So before the water breaks, before contractions started, before anything started that would ignite birth energies to be created, right? And that is a birth before week 38. Or even later, but the baby wasn't ready to leave the womb at all. Maybe that was your experience, Judy, with your son when you said 30 days over and he still didn't want to come. So there might be such a strong relationship that he didn't want to leave the womb, so birth energies would never have been created. So that could be why these other symptoms were not present. Now let's look. So early birth is relative to when the baby is ready. Children are, in this case, or can be quiet and clingy. They might have separation anxiety from the mother. Okay, there's an R missing, and need mother's energy. They really like to stay around and be with mother because they really need her energy. They might pinch, bite, and scratch as children. And as an adult, they are always late. That's such a fun fact. So they can be late. That can be a sign. If it's pathologic, it can be a sign of an early birth. Most often, how do you call that in English when you have the little babies, the Frühgeburt, that go in an incubator?
The preemies, the premature babies.
Preemies, yeah.
Yeah,
So they as an adult can show these signs. So what we help here with, when they are still children, there's something called the pushing game with children, that they are forced, the mother or the father, the mother is better, holds the child really, really tight on the lap, really, really tight, too tight, so the child starts to struggle, but facing the mother with the feet at the belly, and then forces the child to push with the feet into the belly. Yeah, this is the action that is creating birth energy. And it's also it's also called, oh gosh, what's her name? Somewhere from East Europe. Oh gosh, it doesn't come to mind. It's called the holding therapy, where you hold really, really tight to your child or even to an adult. That is all recreating birth situation, the birth situation, and that is releasing these birth energies, or in this case, creating them. Create the birth energies and then release them, right? So that is all part of this process of dealing with unreleased or uncreated birth energies. And now we talk about the cesarean section. If the cesarean section is performed after the birth has started, meaning the birth energies have been created, then it is the same as an interrupted birth, of course, right? The birth energies have been created but not released completely. Or when the cesarean section was scheduled before the birth has started, which is called a planned cesarean, then we have the symptoms of an early birth, where birth energies have not been created yet at all. And then we have the so-called indigo children. So if you think of the spiritual colors, the color indigo, yeah, that's also the color of the spirit. So when the children are born, and remember, when the spirit has not the chance to fully go into the body, either because it wasn't a natural birth, mainly cesarean sections, or something else happened and the connection was not able to form fully, then the spirit is surrounding the baby and the adult, so that doesn't go away. It's surrounding it. There's also the chance that there is sometimes a trauma that causes the spirit to get out, to leave, and then stays surrounding cannot come back in because there's not another birth happening, of course, right? So these are what then people see this indigo color around children or adults, and they have been, given a name, indigo children, while due to Malcolm Southwood teaching, that is simply a sign of the spirit not being completely linked in with the body soul, yeah, which gives them maybe special abilities or not. Often they are not very grounded. That's one sign that the spirit is not quite connected with the soul and the body. That was that. That was me for the first half part. Let's digest that and have a break and stretch the legs. And any questions you might have, we can discuss when we come back in 10 minutes, okay? All right, see you then.
Because I have no idea what I'm doing.
Exactly, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. So I want you to tell me about your birth. And
Okay.
then Yeah, and then I can do. Oh, we can talk about that. Yeah. What do you know about your birth?
I know that my mother was in labor for a very long time, probably 2 to 3 days.
Oh.
So that was way back before they did a lot of, emergency sort of procedures or did any helping. And that I think I said the other day that they literally had to pull me out with forceps. She did have a vaginal birth, but they did pull me out and I had big, long scars on my forehead.
Yeah, we
And
talked about that. Yeah.
yeah, and I also know that she went into very bad postpartum depression afterwards for months, and that she probably has never gotten out of it because she's been depressed most of her life. So that's basically what I know.
And how is your relationship to your mother? How would you describe it?
It is challenging for sure. I'm the only child, so you know, um, she's do you know the term vulnerable narcissist?
Mm-hmm.
That is what she is. Everything has been revolving around her sickness. She didn't want to do anything. She would be sick.
Mm-hmm.
And just had lots of expectations, but never voiced what they were.
Mm-hmm.
So it was always like walking on eggshells around her, not knowing whether you were doing the right thing or not. And right now, so she's 89 years old, and just this year I talked her into going into it's not assisted living, it's independent living situation, which she needed it. She was living by herself, and I don't feel like I could live with her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do see her several times a week and just try to maintain, just talk to her and make sure that she's okay. But I would say there's not a big, strong connection between us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would see that's exactly what we're talking about. Oh, hang on. I'm still recording. Why am I doing that? You want to share? Who wants to start?
I'm happy to start. I was boring. I don't really have a traumatic birth story. As far as I know, like everything was just normal and fine and happy.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was more my birthing experience with my own children. And Ava shared with me her story, which just confirmed that I would really like to, do some work with my son around what happened in his birth experience. But yeah, I think Ava's story is fascinating because she just constellated it. So
who was the client? So you were assessing Eva.
well, she was assessing me.
Okay, so Eva, to what conclusion did you come when you assessed Kimberly? What is the call of action here?
So when I was assessing Kimberly, I didn't see any case because, as you mentioned, and when I asked a couple more questions, there was anything to raise up. So we just finished the task, and she was just a little bit explaining about the birth experience she gave to her children, and then we saw that there could be a case, but not in her case, in her own case.
Okay. And then when Kimberly was assessing you, Eva, Kimberly, what conclusion did you come to?
Well, that yes, there's definitely birth trauma there. She had the cord wrapped around her.
I remember that. Yeah.
Throat, yeah. And then she mentioned that she had a hard time moving away from her mom, and that she felt stuck. It was hard for her to move forward, and that she had recently constellated it, and had, I think, fascinating results come through. Yeah, but that's pretty traumatic.
So in this case, of course, it was already addressed in a constellation. So obviously, you would then probably not need to address that anymore. I don't know, Eva, have you seen any changes?
Yes, definitely. And what was interesting more than when we were doing that workshop, I didn't notice the calendar and stuff, but it was 1 week before my birthday when we did that. And so it was also like pretty good experience, and I really feel much better than before. I really start to like breath full my chest and full my life. So I really wanted to thank you one more time for that
Great.
experience.
Wonderful.
A much better life.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. Wonderful. So when I was working with Judy in this exercise, I came to the conclusion that I would suggest to have both, to have a rebirth for a traumatic birth, and also to work with an interrupted movement towards her mother, because her mother had postpartum depression. And we will talk about that right now. So I won't want to talk about that here anymore, because I'm going through the slides with you, and then you know. And that would be my call of action in case of Judy. Right? Okay, let's go back to the slide. And look at this. So let me just put the video on and the recording on. Oh no, it is on. Are we recording? Are we? Yeah. Are we? Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about postpartum depression, PPD. This is the name that is given to the phenomenon that mothers are rejecting the baby after giving birth. Why is that? It is easy now with all the knowledge that you have, or the information that you have. It's actually easy to explain why this is. Because giving birth to a child is releasing a memory in the mother, in the new mother, of her own birth. That's the trigger. The giving birth is a trigger. And that's a trigger of unreleased birth energies in the mother when she was born. And that is the rejection of the mother that she's now having towards her child. That's one explanation. And the other is that the postpartum depression is causing an interrupted movement in the baby, and it's also the trigger of its own interrupted movement towards their own mother, yeah, when they are born. So either or both together even possible. What is guaranteed is that a postpartum depression in the mother is guaranteed causing an interrupted movement in the baby. Because the rejection of the baby, even if the mother, so there are severe cases and there's severe cases. The severe cases is the mother cannot have the baby around. That's the severest case. The baby is right after birth looked after by others, not the mother. The mother's not feeding the baby, the mother's not cradling the baby, the mother is not hugging the baby. She can't be around the baby, so somebody else is looking after. That is a severe interrupted movement, of course, towards the mother. And then there are lesser severe cases where the mother is able to breastfeed the baby, but is emotionally unavailable to the baby. That is also causing interrupted movement towards the baby, but it's a lesser severity. In this case, we are performing a rebirthing or a family constellation, or both combined. Or combined doesn't mean in one session, but in 2 sessions, right? Because there might be both necessary. Kimberly, what's your question?
Well, I believe I had postpartum depression with my first son, but I was emotionally available for him. Like I made sure, like I would put on a smile, a fake little smile. Even as a baby, I did not want him to know I was unhappy. Like I was upset inside. And it wasn't him. It was just, I was just overwhelmed. I just felt overwhelmed, but I was still emotionally available and still nursing. And I'm just wondering what.
Well, if you fake a smile, you are not emotionally available, because the baby is very susceptible to your true emotion.
So he could still feel it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm not even sure if the baby cannot even see your smile because the eyes would be closed anyhow.
Okay.
They will feel that. That's what I would say. Okay, so that's postpartum depression. And when we have a demonstration, I talked to Judy that we have time to either do an interrupted movement or a rebirthing or something that I would work with her, because in her case, it's obviously that she could, we could help with both, with either or, right? So let's talk about rebirthing. And again, that's a concept. I know many cultures have adopted this concept. What is it?
You froze, and we didn't hear what you said after you said that you chose Judy, and then it froze. So we don't know what you said.
What did I say? Not much. Did I talk about rebirthing already?
Well, it froze after you said you chose Judy to do either an interrupted movement or, and then that it froze.
Oh yeah,
Then
okay.
it
Well, that was
was.
it. Yeah, that was not much
Okay.
more than anyhow. So rebirthing is a concept that in many cultures all over the world in all times have been adopted to describe this phenomenon that the soul or that there are accessible memories coming up from past lives, and that, no, hang on, what am I talking about? Rebirthing, I'm in past life thingy. Forget about that, delete. Rebirthing is a process that I have learned from Malcolm Southwood, that I integrate in family constellations. Sometimes it's a special session in a one-on-one situation. But Bert Hellinger has also performed rebirthing. He didn't call it that, though. Yeah. Oh, Prekop. Now I know the woman who did the holding therapy, the holding tight therapy. Her name is Irina Prekop, and she's very famous for that. From the 1980s, she has, at least in the 1980s, she has developed that, and that's exactly what is described here as the releasing of birth energy. Yeah. So coming back to rebirthing. In rebirthing, you are going through the stages of the birth of the client, his birth or her birth, but this time it's a normal birth. So rebirthing is kind of a hands-on, if you are in the room with your client, hands-on, guided meditation or regression, better, a regression into the birth situation, and then you are overriding the memory of the traumatic birth, the slow birth, the early birth, the cesarean section. You're overriding this memory with a new memory of a normal birth. That's the rebirthing. Yeah. And you can do that once or twice or three times sometimes. I had it with Malcolm in person at least twice. So it's not necessarily done with one, but it can. Yeah. I have done it virtually with clients, and I have done it in a family constellation situation. And Bert Hellinger is also famous for the saying that he says he often represents in a family constellation the mother, physically the mother, because that is when he calls it a family constellation. I call it rebirthing, when he was going with the client through the birthing process. And he always does it with the client, not a representative of the client, by the way. And I also would urge you to do that. I remember one constellation lately, it was in one of the workshops, you might have been present, where we had a rebirthing that just happened. It wasn't intended to be a rebirthing in the family constellation. And there was a representative for the client, and we actually did the rebirthing with the representative for the client. That was the first time it ever happened. And I don't know the effects. I haven't heard any feedback yet. But it is also possible, I suppose, because it happened. So it is possible. But the typical rebirthing is with the client, either in person, which is preferable, or virtual, of course. So first of all, the setup for a rebirthing, and I'm talking about a in-person rebirthing, right, is that you have a room where it's warm, you have to have cushions, you have to have blankets, and you have to have a soft surface. That's all. That's what you need. That's the whole setup. It is nice if you can darken the room. It's not a tremendous necessary, and it needs to be quiet, of course, and undisturbed. That's it. That's what you need. Then you guide, like in a regression, which I which I will teach you tomorrow. You guide your client into alpha state, in a relaxing state. And then you guide your client back to the moment of giving birth, to the moment not of giving birth, in the womb of the mother, in the moment it was the right time to be born. Meaning 40 weeks, water has broken, cervix started to open, birth energies are just about to create. That's the moment where you guide your client to. So when it was an early birth, you allow the client to stay in the womb for longer. So you will overcome this traumatic experience of being born too early, induced or cesarean section or whatever. Yeah. By saying to your client, now you're staying there for longer, right? Now you can stay there for longer. Now you can grow to your full size. Now you can fill in the whole room of the womb. That's the words you would use to make sure he's going over the traumatic experience now into the realm of a normal birth. Then, and of course, if it was a traumatic, late, slow, long birth, you would shorten it and you say, the birth is just about to start, the perfect time to be born. You feel you're ready in the womb, your mother's ready, and all signs are set on green. It's all ready to go. Yeah, that would be the moment you guide them to. Then the next step is to guide them through the whole birth process. That means this is like a guided meditation. Now, this time you really guide them each step along. You not need to wait for them. You want to take them with you. So you say, now you feel how the water is, how it gets dry, because the water breaks, you feel dryness, your skin is rubbing at the walls are really, really tight, you have no space, you need to, we can actually demonstrate that. I don't need to do the details. I can demonstrate that with you. So you go through the whole birth process, and it's of course great if you have experienced it for yourself when you have given birth to your children. But even if you haven't done that yet, you can go online, you can watch videos, you can read books about it, so you know exactly how it feels, how to give birth to a baby. And then in the room, you make sure that your client cannot fall and get harmed, because they will collapse. So once the birth has started, you would put your arms around the upper part of the body of your client, and the arms would be inside. So you are grabbing them around the arms. It's very important. You cannot grab them under the arms. It has to be around the arms. And you have to have a very tight grip and a stable stand, yeah? And then when you are guiding your client through the birth canal, you would increase the grip. It is really, really tight, You might think you break them ribs, but you don't. Yeah, it's that tight. And then the client will tip over forward. That is head down, simulating going through the birth canal. And you will hold it super tight and slowly go down with your client who is tilting forward, not losing your grip. Yeah, and let your client, they will start to struggle. They are full in the birth. They would start to struggle, and you would hold them so tight, and you would go strictly through the birth process as it is, and you would let the client slide through your arms. And as the client proceeds to slip through your arm, you always have to tighten your grip. So when you come to the legs, it's still a tight grip. It must be tight the whole time, like it would be in the birth canal, until you come to the feet, and then you really hold the feet tight with your hands and really let them push the last push against your hands with the feet, right? And then the birth is completed. Now you're both lying on the floor, obviously. The client will be most likely be in the fetal position. That's normally how they lie down. And now you would lie the head of the client in your lap. You are the mother, obviously, the whole time. You are representing the mother. You would cover the client in blankets and cushions, so it's really warm, really feels warm. And then you would praise the client that he has done a great job, as a child, to get born, to be born, and allow him. This is a substitute for the colostrum that they would get from the mother. This praising, that's their nourishment, if you will. And then that is then the end of the rebirthing process. And then you would just leave them there, let them have some rest, and then you would say, now, then like I will teach you tomorrow how to get out of alpha state. It's just reversed to get them out of the time of birth and come back into the here and now. You help the client to release all the birth energies in this process of rebirthing through screaming, crying, heavily breathing, coughing, whatever the client wants to do. You are supporting them in that. Whatever they do, it is good. You say, that's a good job, just go, let it go, whatever it is. You are always representing the mother, of course. You will always encourage your baby to say, you're a good boy, you're a good girl, you can do it. We do it together. You are in the role of the mother. Don't forget that. You're not the facilitator here. And then when the feet came out and you got your client in your lap, you said, now I finally have you with me, my beloved baby, or something similar. Yeah. So the baby is getting this initial praise and love from the mother, and feels safe, knows that this is the end of the birth, right? So it's not dragging on. It's the end of the birth, and everything went well. That is to override the memory and the subconscious mind of the traumatic birth or whatever it was into the normal birth. And that is also on a physical level, releasing any excess of birth energies or creating the birth energies that haven't been created in early birth and releasing them at the same time. Let the client hold a big cushion to hug if you don't want to keep them on your lap. Yeah. If you have like a male client, for example, and you might feel uncomfortable with holding, or it's just too big person to holding them on your lap or whatever, you can always substitute that with a really big cushion. Cushion. Yeah. And keep praising the baby for the job done. And then we do the closing. That's it. Normally takes about 45 minutes. That's the one thing. Now I talk to you about the interrupted movement towards the mother, and then we decide what I'm going to demonstrate. Yes, Kimberly.
Could I do the rebirthing with my son, or would that not be appropriate for me to do?
How old is your son?
He'll be 10 in July.
Okay. And so regressions, I will tell you, I do not recommend to do regressions with children.
Mhm.
I personally do regressions only with adults 18 and older. What was it? Remind me, what was the event with your son? What was the
Well,
birth?
he's aware of it. He had the cord wrapped around him, and
Oh, yeah.
he knows he did, and he even talks about it.
Yeah.
And he was forced out with a vacuum.
And he had the interrupted, you had the postpartum depression, or was it the other one? That was
Yes,
the
I
same.
had postpartum too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it wouldn't hurt if you do it. I
Like,
mean,
he's
you as
a
a
very
mother,
enlightened little being. Like, I
yeah,
feel like he would be okay with it.
of course, do that. I don't
Just
think it could
didn't think
hurt.
it wasn't inappropriate. Okay.
No, not as a mother, anyhow. Like
Okay.
with a client, maybe, but definitely not
Yeah.
as a mother. That reminds me, if that would be actually good to know, Kimberly, if you feed us some feedback, how that went. Because if you
Yeah.
have a client, a mother with a child with these problems, you can get the mother and child together and perform that for her, facilitate that, you know?
Yeah.
Why not? I can't see why not.
I think it would mean a lot to my son because he's already aware. He knows his birth story. I think
Yeah.
it would actually
Yeah.
mean a lot.
So in the case of your son, you would make sure in the rebirthing process that you say to him, you have nothing around your neck, the cord is free. You would paint the picture of a natural, untraumatic birth, of course, right?
Yeah.
And you can also, if it's difficult, if you see there's difficulties to see that picture, you can let them picture that they grab with their little hands the cord and lift them over their head and free themselves. So there's lots of ways that you can make them visualize how they can get out of this traumatic situation.
Yeah, I like that, him doing that, because
Yeah.
then that gives him the power. I like that.
Yeah.
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 Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. That would be interesting to know how that goes. Okay, so now go into detail into interrupted movement towards the mother. It's a bit of a mouthful. I said that before. It's called in German unterbrochene Hinbewegung zur Mutter, and that's the literal translation, which really sounds clumsy. You can also see translations as that's even worse, interrupted reaching out movement towards the mother, things like that. So whatever it is, we know what we're talking about. You can abbreviate it IMTTM if you want to. Why not, right? So when does it occur? It occurs when the baby or the young child or even the embryo in the womb, the fetus, so there is this natural instinct movement from the child towards the mother for nourishment. And you can see that already after birth when they would put your baby on your belly, that would be with the umbilical cord, everything, like straight after birth, that would be the first thing. The baby would try to reach out towards the tits to get the nourishment. It would kind of reach out in any way, shape, or form. The little baby can actually move, right? You can see that there's this instinct, and this is continuing at least the first 2 years, if not 3 years, if not 4. It depends on the child, really, where the child feels that it needs the mother to survive. Yeah, probably with 5 or 6 years, or you know, that's individual. So when there is again this perceived threat of dying, when the child cannot get to the mother when it thought it needed it for survival. And this instinct to move towards the mother is suddenly interrupted when the mother is not there. It has nothing to do with why, right? It has nothing to do with if the mother's doing nobody's doing anything wrong, right? It just happens. It can happen because in the hospital after birth they are just have a protocol to take the child away immediately and bathe it and do stuff and whatnot, and give it back to the mother half an hour later, already the child has an interrupted movement. Yeah? Or after 4 weeks after birth, the child falls ill and has to go to the hospital. And in former days, the mother wasn't allowed to stay there. It was just hospitalized. Boom, you have an interrupted movement. Or the mother has postpartum depression and somebody else is giving the bottle to the baby. Well, interrupted movement. Or is emotionally not available, interrupted movement. Or the mother falls ill, dies with giving birth or after birth. Of course, severe interrupted movement from the baby towards the mother. It doesn't, or the mother just simply needs to go to work. It has to go to work straight after birth because nobody else earns money here, and she needs to feed herself and the baby. Yeah, so that's also causing an interrupted movement, regardless if there's somebody else looking after the baby. That doesn't count for the baby. For the baby, it is about the mother. It's a bond to the mother. The mother is perceived as the one who is preserving life. So whenever there is a situation, and you can now picture pretty much everybody has encountered one or more of these situations as a baby where they couldn't get to the mother when they thought they needed to, and this is causing this interrupted movement towards the mother. However, it is not important that we address every situation in the family constellation. That's not important. It's important that we see there is an interrupted movement and we perform the steps to heal it, to heal this trauma. We might have to do it several times. That's very common. Not one is fixing it all. Maybe there's 2 or 3, but it is not important to find out why there is an interrupted movement. Yeah. So it's not like, okay, now we do an interrupted movement for when you were 6 months old, and now we do an interrupted movement for when you were 2. That doesn't matter. For the field, that doesn't matter, right? As long as there is still an interrupted movement, it will be addressed. And then when there is no interrupted movement anymore, it won't be addressed anymore. And how do we know that? Because of the signs of an interrupted movement. Yeah? That's what we have to look at. And then, of course, we also look at what are we doing and how we actually perform it, and what is about the father, right? It's also a valid question. Okay, so now the definition of the interrupted movement is every child is drawn towards their mother in search of nourishment, care, love, and protection. Without this instinctive energies, the child wouldn't be able to secure its life, right? That is the base of life, physical life, to have this desire. And that is all they have when they are born. That's all they have. If the child is separated from the mother within the crucial first years of its life, this forward movement comes to an abrupt halt. It's like in the tracks, right? And that's a shock. That's a trauma. The child is traumatized, afraid of dying, and loses trust in the mother to be able to protect it. And remember, when we talk about trauma, where are we also looking for? Not what is it we are looking for? Not only the situation, but also
Trigger? The trigger?
The emotion of
emotion. Grief?
guilt
Shame?
or shame.
Yeah, guilt or shame.
Yeah. So that is also created completely irrationally in the child. The emotion of guilt that it has done something that the mother isn't there. You know how children, when the parents, young children, when the parents are fighting or wanting to divorce or something, how the children often adopt the idea it's because of them. Children have the tendency to see everything from their point of view, and it must be about them when something in the family happened. This is causing this irrational emotion of guilt. And that's the same with an interrupted movement. But the energy to move towards the mother is still there. The child wants to go to the mother still, but it feels it can't do it because it doesn't want to be hurt again, subconsciously avoiding pain. So there is always this pulling towards the mother, but not being able to really go there. And that you can see when you inquire with a client. There are symptoms or signs that will tell you it is the case, but more importantly, you clearly see as in a family constellation that's a very specific relationship between mother and child that you know it's an interrupted movement, because this is how it looks like, right? So how it looks like in a family constellation situation is that let's assume the mother has no interrupted movement, so the mother is available emotionally and physically for the baby. She would just stay there. She would see happy, looking at her child, full of love. Yeah, so that's a sign she has no interrupted movement. And the child would look at the mother. This is normally not turning away. It would look at the mother, but cannot say this one word. Which is it? Yeah. It cannot say please to the mother. Incapable, and if it can say please to the mother, it cannot go towards the mother. That is a sign, and the only sign that you have when you have an interrupted movement towards the mother. It's so easy, and it happens all the time. So you have, especially when you start with facilitating family constellation, you have 90% interrupted movement. That's just what it is. That's always the base of life. It's the base of healing to get through that. Yeah. So it can any kind of occurrence is capable to cause an interrupted movement. It can be an accident, an illness of child or mother. The child or mother are in hospital. The mother dies during birth. The mother leaves the family, leaves the whole family behind. The mother's going away for work. The mother is unable to look after the child, PPD, for example. It happens to young children who cannot express themselves and are helpless. So this is from conception to approximately 4 years. It will not occur after that because the child is not helpless anymore. It can say what it needs. It can get it. It has learned. It can get it from others. Protection, nourishment, right? So that's kind of where this is not important anymore. That's where you don't see the severe early childhood trauma. We talked about PPD, of course. And now just to tell you what an interrupted movement is not, when you are inquiring with a client and they are complaining about what the mother did or didn't do, what she wasn't there enough, or she, all this, oh, my relation, oh, my mother was never there, my mother was this, my mother was that. This is why we don't care what they are talking too much. As a client, we would just say, just stop, choose a representative for your mother, choose a representative for yourself, place them in the room and observe, and you'll see if it's an interrupted movement or not. And if the representative of the child is happy to see the mother and happy to go to the mother and give her a hug, it is not an interrupted movement, regardless what the client is talking about. Yeah. But often you see the sign of an interrupted movement towards the mother is expressed when the client is talking as what I call the arrogant child. A child that feels superior towards the mother in any way, shape, or form. It can be severe or it can be subtle. Yeah. But this superiority towards the mother is often a sign, or the sign, when you talk to a client, that gives away that you might have to look at his relationship with the mother and at an interrupted movement towards the mother. So, hyperactive children, so now we're not talking about the adult client that comes to you, but we're talking about the child who had still a child, who has an interrupted movement towards the mother. Let's say the mother has a problem with the child, and then the mother is reporting, oh, my child is hyperactive, yeah? They cannot get the energy from the mother due to this interrupted movement. because they are stopping themselves from getting energy. Yeah. So they cannot get the, so they have to get the energy from somewhere else. They have to create this somehow because they cannot receive it. Interrupted movement is all about receiving the nourishment. It's not about the mother giving anything. The mother gives. When in a family constellation, the mother is present, looking at the child lovingly, she is ready to give. Always have been. There's no doubt about that. Regardless of stories the client told about what the mother did and not do, and if she was there or not there, that doesn't count. We are looking at the constellation and we see it. So when the mother was there, ready to give, open heart situation, then it is always just the rejection of the child through trauma that is not enabling the child to receive the love, which is also what we call a closed heart. The heart is closed. Eva, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, for example, I have one example in my life. My husband's brother's kid, he's like 9 years old and he's very hyperactive, and that's the case when mother left him and her husband. And for example, when I see that and when they know that they have that kind of problem, who can do a family constellation for them, the father, or how they can manage that, because the mother isn't here
Father
and the
can do
child
that.
is small.
Yep.
Father can do that, yes?
Definitely. So remember, the constellation is only done for the client or if they are parents. Parents for their own children can facilitate a constellation, and it's actually it can be their own or it can be a substitute for the child. So in this case, the father, if you know or you suspect it's an interrupted movement towards the mother, then the father can come to you as a substitute for his child. So you would actually constellate for the child, not for the father. Yeah? If it would be the mother who has a young child and thinks that there's an interrupted movement, then you can actually constellate for the mother because she's part of the interrupted movement. So you can constellate for the mother and the child. So the mother is representing herself as a client, if you will, yeah, not the child. The child will be part of it, of course, represented by somebody else.
But when the father comes, then it's like he is representing the child.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
He cannot represent the mother. Nobody can come as a client for somebody else other than their own physical children. Yeah. You know, remember orders of love, first order of love. Okay. The other signs are the disregard of the mother entirely. As an adult, if you know a case from somebody who said, I don't want to have anything to do with my mother, yeah, that's definitely an interrupted movement. Talking negative about the mother can be a sign, but as before, you have to see it in the constellation. It is not a clear sign. However, when they talk negatively about the mother, but they can't let go of the mother neither, if you have this twist and turn situation, that's more strongly pointing towards an interrupted movement. So in the family constellation, as discussed, they can't go towards the mother, but in most cases, they want the mother to come to them. That's very typical for an interrupted movement. Now, this urge that the mother comes to them is not replacing the work they have to do to let their interrupted movement come to an end, because it's their movement that is interrupted, not the mother's movement. So it is literally the child needs to move towards the mother. So you have to ask the mother in every case of an interrupted movement to stand still, not to move towards the child. The child has to come and receive the love from the mother. That's paramount. Otherwise, nothing will change. So if the child doesn't want to go to the mother, then we have these tools, and doesn't want to say please, then we have this tools to make them small, find the other sentences we know. Yeah, I'm small, you are big, you gave life to me, my life came through you. All these words of truth that make the child aware where, the first order of love, where in the first order of love they are, right? After the mother, not before. Anger towards the mother is also a very good sign for an interrupted movement. And also, a very clear sign for an interrupted movement towards the mother is that they can't stay in relationships. Relationship problems are most often due to the relation to the mother. Most often. And also, when somebody comes with a relationship issue, it's really safe to always have the mother represented as well. It would be how can I say that? It would be a sign of it would be how can I put it? If you have a client that has a relationship problem and you only have them both represented, which is fine, you can do that, you can start like it, and then you know how they are on a soul level relating to each other. But a solution to it, just by looking at the two, is like family therapy. You know what I mean? It doesn't help. The third person is needed, always needed, that is not in the picture yet. And that would be the mother. So what to do, how do we do that? In a family constellation workshop, we have mother and child facing each other. The child goes on the knees or is even lying down on the belly. The mother's not moving an inch. And the child says, please, mom, as often as necessary until it can move closer to the mother. With every please, please, mom, please, I need you, that the child is saying, a step towards the mother is enabled. Yeah. And it takes time. Sometimes it just takes a lot of time. Every step is precious here. The end of the movement towards the mother is a hug. Mainly if the representative of the child is small, made themselves small by going on the knees, they hug the legs of the mother. And that's best to start with. Start with the legs, and then you would support, you facilitate this movement by asking the representative of the child to keep the heart open and breathe deeply into it. Because this inhaling is allowing the love flow from the heart of the mother into the heart of the child, right? This is through the act of keeping the heart open and breathing deeply. When you have a remote or a one-on-one session, when you work with your clients, you would do a regression into childhood rather than an interrupted movement towards the mother. Of course, you can do, if you feel you can work with your clients with an internalized constellation, or what Bert Hellinger calls a spiritual constellation, means that your client is very good in visualization, or you have done that before and you know it works, then you just ask them to close their eyes and visualize the whole movement with two representatives, themselves and the mother, right, in front of the inner eyes. That you can do. But some are not very good in following and visualizing that, and they can't really see it, and then it has also no impact, right? So in this case, you rather go to a regression to childhood with the client, to the moment where it was interrupted, and allow the child there, overriding the memory with the positive memory of being able to reach out to the mother at this time. The client faces the mother and says, please, that's kind of the same. And completes the movement that has been interrupted at that time in the regression, in this case. Then you would ask your client to hug a pillow instead of a representative. That is the representation of the mother. Very important that they can actually hug something. Has a big impact, makes it much stronger, the whole movement. And now we talk about what if, what is the troubleshooting here, right? So what is if the mother cannot face or look at the child? What do you think? Why is that and what can you do? Kimberly.
She has an interrupted movement towards her mom and you need to call her mom in.
Very good. That's exactly what is happening here. And that can repeat itself in several generations. So if you have this case, then you just put another mother, another mother, another mother, up to 7. Up to 7 mothers there. And then you see which mother is the first one who is actually looking with love at her child. And that's the first interruption. And that's where you start. And then you go down, 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 each time performing the same interrupted movement to the mother until you end up with the client. That's exactly what we do. Is there anything else? Yeah, that's exactly what we do. Yeah, and allow the flow of love through all generations of mothers. So every time the love has started to flow in the furthest generation, yeah, the mother, the child turns around, leans against the mother for support, and now, and every single time, I have seen it hundreds of times, it never fails, like so precise is this method, that the representative of the mother who couldn't look at the child is now full of love for the child. It is absolutely mind-blowing how inevitably they turn from being absent into a source of love, just by receiving the love from their mother. Yeah. So then they are ready, and then you perform the same interrupted movement, same for the next generation, and so on, and so on, and so on. Okay, if for some reason it doesn't work, if for some reason the mother is not looking at the child, but there is no interrupted movement to her mother, because when you bring her mother in, she goes to the mother and is able to hug her without any problems. So that means there is no interrupted movement, and the mother can still not look at their own child. Of course, you will then go into a family constellation and look for the entanglement, right? Because there would be an entanglement. It wouldn't be an interrupted movement towards the mother. Why the mother cannot look at the child? There's still an interrupted movement of the child towards the mother, but the reason why the mother cannot look at the child is because of an entanglement. They would look at somebody else. They look at somebody else, which is more important, because our entanglements that we are come with on this earth to clear are stronger than any other bond. And we will be not available to our children, even if we love them beyond everything. We are not available until this entanglement is lifted. The family soul is demanding to clear that first, if you will. What if the mother might have to, and the mother can also have trapped birth energies from her birth. Now, that could be the trigger when she gives birth to the baby, like in a postpartum depression situation, that she is not emotionally available to her child. Yeah, but has a good relationship with her mother. Another possibility that you might want to inquire into as well. What is if the child is not willing to move towards the mother? Now we know what to do. We have the words to apply. We have the gestures. And what is if by whatever you suggest to the child is not willing to move towards the mother? What would you do? Kimberly?
I would use the little sisters that you taught us, that
Yes.
I need a little more time.
Very good. That's exactly what you do. You say, I need a little bit more time. That's it. And that's it in movement in itself. That's one step closer. And then remember that the movements are taking place outside of the family constellation situation anyhow. So this might ignite the whole movement that is happening then automatically. Who knows? But it will not be the same as before the workshop. Something will have changed. So we try also, so first of all, we try all the mothers as above, yeah? So we are not talking about a severe case of the child is not willing to move. The client lies down, arms down, face down. It's like the situation of a priest in front, a Catholic priest in front of the cross, really. That is how it looks like, yeah, in severe cases, yeah. If all of this doesn't help, then we say, I need a little bit more time. But first you try that, yeah. So I just remembered one in-person workshop was last year where we had a client. She was adopted. She was adopted, and she had recently contact to her birth mother. She is 50. She had recently contact to her birth mother, but not to her birth father. And in the family constellation, she had no interrupted movement towards her birth mother for some reason. That was interesting to see. So she somehow has worked on it unknowingly to receive the love from her mother, but she wouldn't walk towards her father at all. Absolutely no way. And I tried everything, having her face down, and I have never done that with an interrupted movement towards the father before. Everything that I could think of to you know, to melt her heart, if you will, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Well, then you break it up, of course, trusting that something will happen in her, something will move in her soul that will, you know, go go towards healing somehow. Always repeatedly say, please, mom, or suggest a rebirthing, yeah? And if the child is a boy, it might be entangled with the father who is angry towards his wife, right? So then you can remember this constellation, rather me than you. It might be not an interrupted movement. It might be an entanglement with the father, especially if it's the same sex, if it's a boy. And then you can also try, I'm rather angry at you than my father. Yeah, and if nothing else works, you break it up. We always do that. And it doesn't mean that that's a failure. It just means that that's all that was enabled in this situation. So there's nothing wrong. And what about the father? I answered that, of course, yes, there is interrupted movement towards the father. It's exactly the same procedure. You might use different words instead of I need your nourishment. You would probably say I need your protection. I need your stability. I need your security, or something like that. Where the male energy stands for. But other than that, it's completely the same. It does happen less often. It's just what it is, but it does happen. Yeah. It happens less often because the child can survive without the father, but not without the mother. That's probably the reason why. And of course, the instinct energies are built up towards the mother and not towards the father. That's another reason why it's not so severe. But as you saw in this, as I explained in this case of the adopted child, it can be severe, even though it doesn't happen very often. So we have here a video. We are a little bit over time about an interrupted movement. So instead of doing that, what we do is here, I do a demonstration. Let me just stop sharing. From either an interrupted movement or what was the other one? What was I saying? A rebirthing. What do you want to see? And I do it with Judy. What do we want to see? Or let's decide, Judy, you can decide.
Oh, I don't have a preference. You guys, either one? Kimberly?
I think you should do your rebirthing.
Okay.
Okay, we'll do
Is that okay,
rebirthing.
Eva? Okay. So we do a rebirthing. We will do a quick one, Judy. So that's not taking 45 minutes now. That's probably taking 10. Yeah. But it will still go through all the steps, just a bit more brief. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So, Judy, I would like you to relax your jaw, relax your shoulders, close your eyes. I know you don't need much time to come to a relaxed state. I can see that. You are already known to that. And then I would like you to go deep inside with every breath you take, to this place where you're at peace, where you are safe, where you know you're under control, where you know nothing happens without your agreement. You are the center here. Everything revolves around you. You create your reality. And from this place, we go back in time. We go back in time where you were young. We go all the way back to the womb of your mother, where you find yourself happy, nourished, cared for, and loved in the warmth of the water of the womb. And that's all you know. This is heaven. It's just the best place. No lack. Nothing's missing here. You cannot even fathom that anything could be different at any time. From this happy state, all of a sudden you realize that you have less and less space, that the room you live in so happily for so long is kind of shrinking, and you have no place to move. And the only way you can move is with your head down, and the walls are coming closer and closer. And you feel how it dries out in your lovely wet home. And you rub your skin on the walls, and it's very uncomfortable. And then the walls come in rhythmic, in a rhythm down on you forcefully. And you know for sure you have to leave. You have to leave this home. There is no other way. There's only one way out. And that's where you feel it is opening at the top of your head. And you all of a sudden feel this strength that you can do it. That it's your job to press with your little feet against the wall, and with your head you're pressing against the opening in the attempt to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And every time the walls come down on you, you press hard. And you know you can do it. You know you are born for it. And you know your mother can do it as well. and you're pressing against the wall, and the opening is widening, widening, and all of a sudden you feel how your head slips through, and you press with your feet, and the legs are stretching for the first time. And now you really feel your power, that you can do it. And that's the way out. And even if it's unknown where you go, and it feels scary, but the urge to go out and let go of your first home and your mother is much stronger. And you press and you press, and you feel the tight walls like a tunnel around your shoulders. And you think, oh my gosh, this is so tight. How can I ever go through? But you know you can go through. You have this innate knowingness that everything is okay. That's exactly as how it meant to be. That's a perfectly normal birth. And you continue to press with your feet. And now you feel how you make way. And your shoulders are starting to wiggle through the tunnel. And all of a sudden, a last breath with your feet, and your shoulders and your head come out of this tunnel into the world full of light and sound and scent and stimulation. And you feel so good about you that you made it on your own, you and your mother. And you feel the warm belly of your mother that you are lying on, her head around you. You hear her voice saying, "My little girl, we made it. Everything went well. Finally, you are here with me. I was waiting to meet with you for so long. Now, now we are together." And you feel how your mouth finds her breast and the warmth of her milk in your body. And you know this is even more heaven than it was where you came from. And you feel at home, and you feel safe, you feel whole in the love of your mother, in the unity with your mother, with all of that that you have achieved together in the last 7 hours. And with this feeling of achievement, of completion, you come back in time to the here and now, to the room where you are sitting. You take a deep breath. And whenever you're ready, you'll open your eyes.
Like 2 seconds.
Hey,
Felt like 2 seconds went by.
wow.
It was so fast. Yeah.
How was it for you?
I felt it. I could feel the whole being inside of myself and pushing out. Yeah, it was
Wonderful.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you.
volunteering here and for your feedback. So this is how you would do it in a obviously in a remote situation, but I urge you to practice it first in person. You really need to experience it in person with your client, with yourself. You can ask somebody else to perform it for you, that you know exactly how to find the word in a remote situation. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, I leave you with this. I see you tomorrow, same time. Yeah. And if you have any
Thank you.
questions, we go through it then.
So are we doing 7:30 again, or are we back to
No, not
7?
necessarily. I can do, if that's okay.
Can you do any earlier?
No,
Or-
can't. I teach yoga before that. So,
Okay, 7
Yeah.
o'clock then.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. See
And
you
bye-bye.
then. Bye.
Bye.